What's up, guys? This is Josh. Welcome back to Fab 201, episode number 12. Today, we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of Blitz. So, if you have no idea how to play Blitz or very little experience playing Blitz, you have no idea what the metagame is like, you have no idea what the differences between Blitz and CCR, I'm here to break everything down for you guys. So, this will be a good one. The topic of Blitz is actually quite large, so I've actually broken this episode, or I've broken down this topic into two sessions. So today, episode 12, we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of Blitz. So that means we're going to be talking about the general format, we're going to be talking about the metagame, and we're going to be running through the heroes and their strengths and weaknesses and creating a tier list for every single hero in Blitz. The next episode number 13, we're going to be talking about specific deck lists for the top tier heroes and just run through their general game plans and how they interact with the other decks. So let's just jump right into that. All right. First of all, just a refresher for those of you who don't know all the details about what the Blitz format is. Let's go through that right now. So to play Blitz, you're going to bring a 52 card deck. So I shouldn't say deck. You will bring 52 cards to battle. You will have a 40 card deck. No more, no less, exactly 40 cards. In addition to that, you'll bring 11 inventory slots. This is your weapons and equipment. And then finally, the 52nd card will be your young hero card. Okay. You are not allowed to play adult heroes, obviously, in Blitz. Okay. Up to 2 copies of each unique card is allowed. So if you have a card like Razor Reflex, you can run 2 red, 2 yellow, and 2 blue if you want. Okay. If a card is a legendary card, you can only run 1 copy of that, like Gorgonian Tome or the Pulses. Okay. Blitz rounds are 30 plus 5, so you have 5 minutes to set up and then 30 minutes for the round. The setup actually should be extremely quick because there's no sideboarding. All you have to do is pick your weapons and equipment, which actually should just be, you should just be on autopilot for that for the matchups. So the games will be best of 1, so I expect most people to be done within like 15-20 minutes. I would be actually shocked to see even the most grindy of control games go to time in Blitz. The Blitz format also has a unique banned and suspended list, so their BNR is separate from the Classic Constructed, and we're going to go over that shortly. And currently there are 27 legal heroes in Blitz. Quite a few more than the 16 legal heroes in CC at the moment. So there's actually a lot of heroes that you need to be familiar with. And some of these heroes have an adult counterpart, but some of these do not have an adult counterpart. So let's just go through the heroes right now. Let's take a look at the young heroes of Wraith. All right, so here you can see every single young hero that is or was legal in Blitz, and I'm gonna break this down in terms of like a timeline, tell you guys a little bit about how the game was. Okay, so over at the top left we have Ira. Ira was is a starter hero, right? But she also was very, very powerful and still is very, very powerful. Then we have our Welcome to Wraith heroes, Bravo, Dory, Ketsu, and Reinhardt. Then they were followed by the ARC heroes, Azalea, Dash, Viscera, and Kano. Prior to Crucible War, Blitz did not exist. So once they introduced Crucible War and the 6 other heroes there, that's when they created the Blitz format, and that's when people started playing Blitz. So we have Kabdeen, Ko, Benji, Shiana, Daddledal, and Kasai, all of which did not see too much play because they didn't have their specializations at the time, and all the other heroes had specializations. Bravo had Crippling Crush, Dory had Steel Blade Supremacy, you know, Ketsu had his Lord of Wind. And the Shapeshifter and Merchant classes still don't have much support, so they're still not very good. But KO, Benji, Dadadol, and Kasai all got some nice upgrades in Everfest. But when the original Blitz format came out, this is about when I started playing, so this was early 2021. The main format that I learned was Blitz. So I've played hundreds of games of Blitz in that format. And, you know, you basically had Ira, Dory, and Kano as the dominating heroes back then. Anyways, moving on, in 2021, we had the release of Monarch, and this was the very first time that there were talented heroes. And we saw Chain have some relevance in Blitz back then. Leviah, Bolton, and Prism, they were more relegated to CC. And yeah, so that shaked up the metagame a little bit. But the biggest change to the Blitz metagame actually came with Tales of Aria, where we had Briar, Lexi, and Oldhim enter the format. Briar and Oldhim were both pretty popular and quite strong, and they really changed the landscape of the Blitz format. Moving on, set 6 was Everfest, and we saw 3 new heroes there. We saw Valda, Genis, and Icelander. So Icelander back then did not see much play because she didn't have the full ice package and elemental wizard, elemental ice wizard cards that she got in Uprising. But she was introduced back then. And some people did try her out then, but she obviously got much stronger with the Uprising cards. And then we move on to, you know, early this year, Dorinthia Quicksilver Prodigy was added to the format. So this was the first time we see a hero have 2 versions, which was quite cool. And then finally, Dromai and Phi joined the format in Uprising. And so currently, a couple months ago, Viserai hit LL. So Viserai is actually not legal in the format. But we have a wide variety of heroes to choose from, as you can see. Some of them have adult counterparts, some of them do not. And they all play a little bit differently. So anyways, I was talking about the BNR. Let's talk about the banned and suspended list, because that is actually very important to understand. Okay, so this video is being recorded on October 4th, one day after the October 3rd BNR. And this is the current Living Legend banned and restricted list. So let's just quickly go through this and talk about which heroes they affect and why they were banned. So very quickly, let's just start off with Viserai. So Viserai back then played with the Bloodsheath Scalata and the Sonata. And that hero was just completely overtuned, to be frank. Could kill you from nowhere at near full life. But he won a few... He won a calling, and he won a bunch of the Season 4 skirmish events, so he LL'd. And alongside him, Nebula Blade also LL'd. Okay? Not that that's particularly important, because I don't know why Chain or Briar would ever run Nebula Blade when Rosetta Thorn exists, but just to be thorough, Nebula Blade has also... it's also effectively banned. Okay? All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So the cards in red are banned, and the cards in orange borders, those are restricted. Okay? Let's start with the banned cards. The most recent banning was Bloodsheath Scalata. This card provided a lot of armor for the Rune Blades, as well as a lot of tempo. You could use the Vexing Quill Hand in the Bloodsheath Scalata. That generated quite a bit of value. And this card was just a little too overtuned, and they decided to go after this card and bring back Sonata. So there's that. Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, this card was primarily played in Benji and in Fi. Benji this used to grab Spring Tidings, and Fi would use this to grab Lava Burst or Salt the Wound. And this was just translating into too much damage. Mask of the Pouncing Lynx basically represented at least 5 damage, sometimes 6, 7 damage. And just having that on the field at all times was just making Fi just too ridiculous. I played some games against Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, Fi, and Blitz recently, and they could easily do 30 damage in a turn. So I think that was a smart ban from LSS. All right, going back in time a little bit more, we have Awakening being banned. This was banned because Oldhim would take advantage of this pretty easily, and it kind of negated the whole fact. Like, Awakening could just take the tempo, literally, at whenever the Oldhim wanted to, and Oldhim was already a very, very, very strong hero. So hitting this card just made it so there was a little bit more counterplay for the combat-based decks. Ball Lightning was banned because Briar could use this to great effect, and it was a little bit too much damage output in a deck that already had a lot of damage output. Drone of Brutality, this was actually the very first card to get banned. This card just goes against the fundamental design of the game of Flesh and Blood, because this allows you to recycle a card that basically infinitely. And I think one of the only draws I ever got in Blitz was because both players had a Drone of Brutality loop. So this card just could just goes against the philosophy of having every card matter. Duskblade, this is the card that started the whole meme of we made a mistake. The very first time I read this card, I was like, what are they doing? Like, this card, it is just too easy to turn Duskblade on, and this thing gets out of control very, very quickly with just a couple counters on it. Sorry. Heart and Crosstrap, this is a card that allowed decks to just go really, really, really quickly. And this was primarily used in the Reinhardt deck list, and it was creating games that were a little too fast for LSS's taste. Snapback, this was banned when Icelander came out, and this was often a 5 or 6 of in the Kano deck. Aether Flare into Snapback, or Aether Wildfire to Snapback. There was a lot of things that you could do with this card, and it just this was a precautionary ban against the Wizard class. As you can see, there's 2 more Wizard cards on this list. The Wizard class is actually fairly hard to balance, because getting a extra turn and playing at instant speed is more balanced in CC when there's a longer game, but in Blitz, games are so quick that these cards are pretty strong. Speaking of strong cards, Stir the Aether Winds. This card was... I've seen this card played against me at least 100, 200 times. This card is combos with Fork Lightning, so it was very common play pattern back then was Storm Striders, Stir the Aether Wind, Fork Lightning with Metacarpus nodes dealt 14 damage. So if you were running AB3 and you dropped below 11 health, you basically were dead, which is not hard for Kano to do. Next we have Stubby Hammers. Stubby Hammerers. Gotta say it correctly. This was banned because of Fi. This card just offered Fi 5-6 damage on a stick, similar to Mask of Pouncing Lynx. This is just it's just too strong for a 20 life format. Crown of Seeds, this was we talked about the banned cards. So the red cards, those are banned. Those are likely never coming back. The restricted cards, these all have a stipulation on them. So Crown of Seeds says is currently restricted, and if Oldhim gets Living Legend, then Crown of Seeds will return. If Seeds of Agony, if Chain Living Legends, it will return to the format. And Storm Striders is just restricted until the next BNR. So they're basically kind of waiting and seeing how the Wizards perform. So Crown of Seeds, this was banned because in combination with Rampart of the Ram's Head and 17D reacts, this was the most unfun deck to play against ever. This was during the height of this was like during PT1. I remember a lot of the top tables at the Battle Hardened there were all very, very defensive Oldims playing mirror matches against each other. Seeds of Agony, this card was banned because Chain is already very, very strong. And this card just is a 0-cost blood debt. It's a non-attack action. It just does everything you want for basically no cost. And this card was actually banned in CC as well because it's just too powerful. Storm Striders, so this was recently banned as of yesterday, and this is actually the card that I don't actually see how Kano and Icelander really deal with this being gone. The two possibilities are Mage Master's Boots for Tome of Fendel or Snapdragons for like E-Strike or something. We'll see how they adapt to this, but this was a critical card for their deck and a extremely important piece of equipment that they lost because this essentially gave them an extra turn as well. So we'll see how they adapt, but this is a much bigger deal for Kano than for Icelander. Kano just got all his goodies removed. Like, he used to play Snapback, Stir, and Storm Striders, and now he can't play any of them. It's very possible that the next set does help Wizards tremendously. Wizard is a class very similar to Warrior and Ninja, where I feel like the more cards in their pool, they're the classes that fundamentally they just get much stronger. So we'll see what LSS decides to do with Storm Striders in the future. But as of October 3rd and for the World's metagame, it is restricted, which means you cannot play it. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the Blitz format in general now. So, if you've been watching Fab 201 for a while now, you will know that I did a Season 4 primer guide, and I talked about how there were certain metagame constraints in Blitz, and that basically made certain heroes viable or not viable. And back then, I talked about three things in particular. I talked about speed, power, and defense. And I decided to think about it a little bit more. And given that there are so many heroes now in Blitz, I think adaptability is also very, very important. So let's go over these four things that I think are really, really important. So speed. So in Blitz, if you do not have sufficient speed, it is very possible for decks like Chain Dashify to just high roll you and just kill you. It is very, very possible for them to have 20, 25, 30 damage turns. And if you cannot progress your game plan in a quick manner, if you come against these really, really quick decks, you could just lose out of nowhere. Power is very, very important because there are some very, very defensive decks like Ultim and Bravo. Although they are built less defensively now, they still can be built in a very defensive manner. So if you don't have enough power in your deck to punch through 10 or 11 armor, as well as all 3 blocks and, very, very good defensive suite, you're going to have some trouble against these very, very defensive decks. Another metagame constraint is defense. So if you do not have sufficient defense, in other words, if your cards don't block for 3, they mostly block for 2. If you don't have enough armor, or you don't have enough D-reacts or defensive tools like Steadfast, Oasis Respite, stuff like that, you're going to struggle against Benji and Dorinthia in particular, but there are also other heroes that punish you if you have low defense. If you don't have armor against Benji, he can really just pop off, and Dorinthia will cut you up if you don't have D-reacts in your deck. So, again, these are the three things that I talked about in the past: speed, power, and defense. But Adaptability, I think this is a very, very important metric. So this, how I like to define adaptability here is how well can your deck adapt to the 27 heroes in the game, and how well can you adapt to things not going your way. So like heroes with low adaptability are like Dash and Briar. So Dash in CC has a 5-star rating in adaptability because you could switch between control dash or boost dash. But in Blitz, because of the life totals and just the general constraints of the metagame, you basically have to play boost dash. So whenever you sit down across from a dash in Blitz, you know what they're going to do. And they have very little ability to pivot from that plan. Decks like Briar, they're so reliant on cards like Channel Mount Heroic that if they don't draw it in the first 5 turns of the game, they're probably out of it by that point. So adaptability is really just, having a fluid plan. Decks that do this very well are, for example, Oldhim. Oldhim can adapt to what the opponent is doing, and they're one of the few decks that can actually just fatigue the opponent if the conditions are correct. And just in general, having a deck that has cards that can apply to many, many different matchups is very, very important. So having silver bullet cards is not where you want to be. And having a deck that most of the switch decks, like Bolton, Prism, Dash, are generally not very good in Blitz because they really need their sideboard to supplement their main board plan. So basically, if you have a deck in CC that doesn't really need to add many cards from the sideboard to have a solid game plan, they're generally going to have a high adaptability score in Blitz as well. Okay. The final point here I wrote is that if you lack in one of these particular categories, there's going to be O10 matchups. There's going to be matchups that are going to be near impossible to win. So in order to have a good Blitz deck and to compete in the current metagame, you need to have speed, power, defense, and adaptability. All right. So right now I want to talk about all 27 heroes in a tier list, basically. And we're going to run through each hero and how they score in terms of speed, power, defense, and adaptability. So let's just jump into that now. All right, so this is what I consider to be the tier 1 or 1.5. So these are the kings and queens of Blitz. At Worlds, do not be surprised if you play against only these heroes. So in terms of tier 1, I put down Ultimate Chain. And in terms of tier 1.5, I got Dory, Reinhardt, Dash, Kasai, and Fi. And as you can see here, I got different scores for their speed, power, defense, and adaptability. Totaled them up, gave them a score, and put them in a tier. So let's just quickly go through each of these heroes and their scores and I'll give you some reasoning about why I give them those scores. All right, so Oldhim, let's talk about this hero first. So Oldhim is a deck that is traditionally not very quick. Even if you're playing the pummel version of Oldhim, it still takes you 2 or 3 big turns to get them low. And if you're trading damage with them, you're going to get into situations where you're probably just going to hit them with the hammer. And it's just, Oldhim is just not, Guardians in general are not quick, especially compared to other decks. However, a lot of the Guardian cards are very, very powerful. And if you need to set up a second cycle with Oakenwold, that's also very easy. Pulse of Eisenloft is not banned in Blitz, so it's very, very possible to set up some good turns with that. In terms of defense, Oldhim is the best defensively. If he runs Skullcap, Tech Plate, Crater Fist, Iron Rot with Stag, he has 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 armor, so he has effectively 33 health. It's ridiculous. Most of his cards block pretty decently, and he also has access to a D-React. So if he if he uses his Ice React or Earth React very smartly, he can deny a lot of big turns from other people. In terms of adaptability, I give him a 5 because Oldhim is a deck that can really take on any deck. Whether you're physical damage or magical damage, whether you're wide or tall, Oldhim really can handle every single hero in the game. And as such, I think he is, alongside Chain, I think he is the strongest hero in Blitz at the moment. Even with the Crown of Seeds and Awakening removed from him, he's still an excellent choice. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a giant portion of the metagame playing Oldhim. All right, next we have Chain. Chain is a hero that L'd from CC, but is still very, very strong, running around in Blitz, mainly because Plunder Run is legal in Blitz as well. In terms of speed, Chain is pretty quick. He doesn't need many Soul Shackles to kill you, especially when this is a 20 life format. He can kill you in 3-4 turns pretty easily. In terms of power, Chain is clearly a 5. He's gets to play all of his good cards from CC in addition to having Plunder Run. And he gets to use all of his equipment for those burst turns if he wants to. So he's a very, very, very nice hero. In terms of defense, Carrion Husk plus Grasp of the Arcanite provides him pretty good defense. And Chain can kind of set up the first 2 turns or so. So he can actually pop off on 2, 3, 4 Soul Shackles with nearly full life, meaning that he can probably take like 2 cycles of damage. Chain, though, I would put as a 2 in terms of adaptability because Chain's game plan is pretty linear, and Chain actually doesn't do too well against the Wizards, although they're probably not going to show up in a huge amount. But Chain does kind of struggle against decks that attack him from a different angle or hit him with some on-hit effects once he uses his Carrion Husk. As such, I give him a 2 there. But overall, the speed and power of this deck is just off the charts, basically. And as such, I give him a 15.5 out of 20. Alongside Oldhim, he's in tier 1. Moving on, we have Dorinthia. This is a hero I love. I've played hundreds of games on this hero. The current Dorinthia is neither fast nor slow. She can kill you pretty quickly if you're not blocking. She could put you into spots where you need to block, but she doesn't finish the game particularly quickly. In terms of power, she has pretty powerful cards, especially in a 20 life format. The only reason this power score is not higher is because a lot of heroes will have quite a bit of armor. And in particular, Oldhim and Chain are not amazing matchups for Dorinthia. In terms of defense, Dorinthia is pretty great. She has the Fridge, and all of her cards block for 3. And her adaptability is a 4, because if Dorinthia doesn't draw the right hand, she can just block, move on with her life. And she can really, because she plays at instant speed or reaction speed a lot of the game, she can really choose whether or not to push on a turn or to hold back, set up an arsenal, and wait for a better turn. So Dorinthia actually can handle a wide variety of situations, and as such, I give her a 4. Overall, I would say she's tier 1.5, 15 out of 20. All right, next we got Reinhardt. Reinhardt is a deck that is pretty quick. This deck can chip you down over 2 turns to like 13 or 14, and then just kill you out of nowhere with Blood Rush Bellow, intimidating 4 cards. In terms of power, Reinhardt's power level is pretty high. Blood Rush Bellow turns with the equipment often do 20 damage. And if you get intimidated, you basically only have your armor to block. In terms of defense, Reinhardt's okay. Most of his cards block for 3. Scabskins are a decent blocker, and you know he can run Crown of Providence or Skullcap in the head slot, so he has a decent defense. The only downside is that Reinhardt is a deck that once he gets kind of low on health Like, he can't really have a pivot turn. And he basically has to kind of switch back into a, one big attack per turn, which generally doesn't get it done against the more defensive decks. Reinhardt has pretty low adaptability because he's really, really reliant on Blood Rush Bellow. However, even if he doesn't see that for quite a while, he still blocks pretty well. So he can extend the game against certain heroes if he wants to. Reinhardt is also pretty good against the Wizards. This was one of the reasons why we saw Reinhardt be so popular, is because he had a very, very favorable Kano matchup and Icelander matchup, because he would barraging beatdown and say, all right, you want to go now? No? Okay, I'm going to intimidate another card. And, with lower life for the Wizards and them having no armor, they could just die in one shot. But with those being gone, I would say, Reinhardt lost a little bit of his luster there. As such, I give him a 14 out of 20, tier 1.5. Next, we got Dash. Dash is one of the quickest decks in the whole format. Boost Dash can present, 35 damage in 2 turns very, very easily. Boost. Max velocity is really hard to stop in Blitz, and if Dash kind of just stumbles into the nuts, they can just kill you from nowhere. So they're a very quick deck, pretty powerful deck as well. The boost mechanic in combination with Tekla Pounder just creates a lot of value in a short format. Dash's defense, like Reinhardt, is decent. She has Tekla Foundry Heart, and she has access to Crown of Providence or Skullcap. And most of her cards do block for 3, although she doesn't really want to be blocking for 3. She'd rather be boost, max velocity if she can. As such, she has a 1 out of 5 in terms of adaptability. I don't think you can build Control Dash in Blitz. If somebody wants to prove me wrong, go ahead and try. I really don't think there's time to set up against decks. And as such, you basically have to play Boost Dash, and that's pretty predictable. And certain decks, if you don't deal enough damage to them quickly, they are just going to try to fatigue you. Moving on, we have Kasai. This is a deck that actually I would put lower, but with the Wizards exiting, I think Kasai is not a bad choice. Kasai is pretty slow because she has a multi-step process to her deck. She needs to hit you a few times, chip away your life, get some copper, then she has to play blood on her hands and try to finish you off with attack reacts, basically. Kasai is pretty strong in terms of her power because copper is a very, very interesting mechanic for her, and she can often play with just one card. It's very possible for Kasai to block with her whole hand and come back with Courage of Blade Hold plus blood on her hands for 6 copper and, just take all the tempo back then. In addition to that, she has very, very excellent defense. Valiant Dynamo is a staple card of her deck. And in addition to that, all of her cards block for 3, and she has access to the other warrior staples like Courage of Blade Hold and Braveforge Bracers. As such, her defense is just as good as Chain's, second only to Oldhim. In terms of adaptability, Kasai doesn't really have much adaptability. She's pretty linear in what she's doing. She's just trying to attack you with 2 sabers a turn, trying to generate some copper, and then go for blood on her hands. So if you have a deck that can sacrifice your armor to block the copper generation and then push back a lot of damage on her, she doesn't really deal with that style very well, and she doesn't deal very well with Wizard at all. She generally is running like 10 blues, and yeah, so those were tough matchups. But with the Wizards probably gone for Worlds, Kasai does improve a bit. As such, I gave her a 12.5 out of 20 in tier 1.5. Next, we have Fi. Fi was much higher on this list, but with Mask of the Pouncing Lynx being banned, Fi has to resort to using Mask of Momentum, and pretty much every single hero here, as you can see, has enough defense to handle the Mask of Momentum triggers. Anyways, Fi is, in terms of speed, one of the fastest decks in the format. Faster than Dash, probably. If I could give Fi a 6, I would, but we have rules, I guess. In terms of power, Fi's deck actually has a ton of power. Spreading Flames, Art of War, very, very powerful cards, can go very wide and deal a ton of damage. The only reason this is cut down slightly is because Massive Pouncing Lynx got banned. Fi, in terms of defense, unfortunately, is pretty garbage. Even with Shuka, there is a way to build Fi to be full tank, but even then, your cards block for 2, and your damage output is so reliant on your how many cards you have, that if you're starting to block, you basically have lost the game as Fi. As such, I give him a 1.5 in terms of defense. Fi's adaptability is pretty poor as well. He basically has to put on the gas and go. The only reason I give him a little bit higher than Dash is because Fi can kind of wait for the best hand a little bit more than Dash. If Fi really wants to set up a big turn, against certain decks, he probably can do that. And still present a decent amount of damage output with just a couple cards. Anyways, as such, I gave Fi a 12.5 out of 20, also in tier 1.5. All right, so these 7 heroes I consider to be the best in the game. Let's go and move on and talk about the tier 2 heroes. All right, tier 2, as I like to call them, the middle ground. So these 7 heroes here, Ira, Bravo, Briar, Prism, Dromai, Benji, and Icelander, I consider decent choices, and heroes more than capable of taking down a game if they get the right matchup, get the right draws, and are piloted properly. Let's start with Ira. Ira's the old guard here. Ira is basically the benchmark for whether a deck is good or bad. Ira is one of the most consistent decks in the format, and just her play style is powerful. Like, the whole block for 2 cards, attack with 2 cards, play style is extremely efficient. And if your deck is not doing something a little bit unfair, Ira's gonna, tear you up pretty easily. In terms of speed, Ira's not a quick deck. Ira, even though they have access to Snapdragons and they're a ninja, generally it's just Kodachi something at the end. The most explosive turns you would see from Ira would be like Kodachi, E-Strike, Snapdragon, CNC, stuff like that. And she can only do that once a game. In general, Ira wants a longer game in general because her hero ability gives her more and more value over the course of a game. So if Ira can kind of, work the health totals down together and get to the late game, you can Kodachi lock people. Anyways, in terms of power, just her hero ability is really, really good, and her play style is very, very efficient. As such, I would give her a 4.5. Ira's defense is not too bad. Most of her cards block for 3, unlike the other ninjas. And she does make good use of Flick Flack as well. But she doesn't really have a lot of armor. But overall, I'd say she gets by. In terms of adaptability, Ira can, to a certain degree, slow the game down if she wants. And she can speed up if she wants. And she can kind of wait for her powerful cards if she wants. And overall, she can handle most situations decently. Anyway, so I gave Ira a 12 out of 20. Put her in tier 2. Bravo. This is a hero that is just like Ira, very, very stable hero, but has a little bit different stat spread than Ira. So in terms of speed, Bravo is not very quick, just like most Guardians. Bravo's power. Now, you might be thinking like Guardians are like, in terms of their raw power, is like really, really high. But you have to remember in Blitz, people can just throw the fridge at your first crippling crush and just move on. So Bravo kind of needs the game to... He either needs to play against heroes with low armor, or he needs to really line it up with a pummel for it to really hit. In terms of defense, Bravo does really, really well. He has a great suite of armor. All of his cards block for 3, except for pummel and maybe a few other cards. But unfortunately, Bravo, his adaptability is not very high. Once you get low on life, Bravo's kind of in trouble. You basically get one shot at a big turn with Bravo before you get chunked down. And as such, I think if you get to the late game as Bravo, you're kind of in trouble because you're just swinging your hammer, and you know your opponent can easily set up a play where they go down to like 1 health and then just kill you. As such, I gave Bravo a 12 out of 20, also in tier 2. Briar, this is a hero again that was higher up, but with Scalata being banned, Briar lost 2 health, which is pretty big, especially considering that she wants to use most of her cards and she would rather throw armor at problems. Briar is a pretty quick deck if you find the right cards, and in terms of power, also pretty good, although most of it is contingent on drawing Channel Mount Heroic in a timely fashion. Briar's defense is decent. She did lose 2 block on the Scalata, but overall she does run Crown of Providence. She has access to Grasp of the Arknight, and you know, if she gets an embodiment, some of her cards could start blocking for 4. Not too bad. Briar's adaptability though is pretty low because if you don't draw the right cards at the right time, there's not much you can do as Briar. You can't really pilot your way out of bad situations as Briar. All right, next we got Prism. This is a hero that again was also higher, but Prism sort of lost one of their main purposes in the metagame, which was to bully the wizards. So in terms of speed, Prism is fairly quick. You can only take so many 6-for-1s, 7-for-2s with Go Again before you got to start blocking. So the Heralds are innately pretty powerful and pretty quick, but the issue is that her adaptability is quite low. She's going to have some matchups that are really rough. Any deck that has a lot of poppers is going to give Prism a giant headache, because in Blitz you cannot pivot to the aura strategy, so you're basically stuck on Herald aggro. Why are you stuck on Herald aggro? Because if you play Aura Prism, you're going to get run over by Dash and Phi and, you know, Dorinthia, Chain. They're just going to demolish you if you go Aura Prism. So you basically are forced to go Herald Prism, and Herald Prism is pretty bad against certain decks. So that's why she gets a very, very low adaptability score. In terms of defense, not too bad. Most of her cards block for 3. She has Spectral Shields. She has good on hits. She has the ability to play Crown of Providence, so she could be somewhat... she could throw armor at some problems, at least. But overall, defense is not a strong suit of Prism. Anyways, I gave her a 12 out of 20, also in tier 2. The next hero that we want to talk about is Dromai. Dromai is the other illusionist, and this hero is pretty slow to enact their game plan, which I believe is going to be a mix of cheap dragons plus Cenopies, if I had to guess how Dromai players would build their Blitz deck. Just the whole fact that you need Ash, and then you have to turn those Ash into dragons, and then you have to get chip damage in with them over time. It just takes a long time to do that. In terms of Dromai's cards, they're not bad, but Prism's cards, pound for pound, are a little bit stronger in my opinion. Dromai's defense is also decent. She doesn't have access to the Spectral Shields, but she has access to a little bit more armor. And, you know, just having the dragons out there also can lure some people into hitting those. Dromai has a decent adaptability score in that she can, you know, if she wants to set up a second cycle, she can. A lot of the dragons are just kind of decent all around. Like Hyloria is just good. Like There's a lot of I think Dromai can handle quite a few situations, and overall, I don't think she's a awful pick at all. Next up, we have Benji. This is a hero that people are going to be a little bit surprised that I put this so high. The reason is that if you play against a good Benji, they're going to set up a Spring Tidings, and there's going to be nothing you can do about it. This deck can be built in such a way that if they want to score this hit, they can. The only issue is that armor really shuts down Benji, which a lot of the top tier heroes have armor. That's the only issue. Benji actually can, with Mask of Momentum, which actually he didn't always play Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. In certain matchups, he was playing MOM. But anyways, he has decent power, decent speed. However, the downside is that he has pretty poor defense. In addition to this, he starts at 17 life, which is pretty brutal. His hero effect is also a little bit hard to turn on from time to time. And in general, he doesn't do very well against heroes that can just block him out. So his adaptability is quite low. But I still think Benji is not too bad, especially with the new, Uprising cards. Take the Tempo, Double Strike. These were all very nice additions for Benji. The only reason people put him lower is because I think they haven't played against a strong Benji pilot. If you play against a strong Benji pilot, he's gonna get Spring Tidings off on you. Anyways, let's move on and talk about Icelander. This hero was at the other page, like top of tier 1. This is the hero I'm most unsure about its position, so I kind of conservatively just put it in the middle here. Icelander's speed was never particularly quick. Kana was much, much quicker. Icelander kind of wants to slow the game down as an ice hero. And she just wants to get, a lot of value from Waning Moon. In terms of her cards, like pound for pound, like Channel Lake, Frigid, Aether Ice Vein, these are really, really powerful cards. So I think she has the ability to do that. The only issue is that she could get into a point where she doesn't have her arsenal very, very quickly because there's just too much damage coming at her. And I think a lot of the cards that she could use to slow down the game or set up like Frost Hex and the one when you fuse Insidious Chill. Like I don't think there's enough time to set those up and get value from them in Blitz. So if this was CC, I mean her power would actually be like a 4.5 or a 5. Like pound for pound, her card's really, really strong. But in Blitz, I don't think she can play all those cards, unfortunately. In terms of defense, Icelander for a wizard is not too bad. Most of the cards block for 3. Also has access to Cornet Peak if she wants. The only issue now I'm thinking about is like, what are they going to run in the foot slot? I talked about a little bit earlier. Mage Master Boots might be decent. Mage Master Boots could give you some more defense if you need, indirectly with the health gain. We also could just see them running Iron Rot Legs like Bravo does. We'll see what they do. In terms of adaptability, Icelander I think is in CC is much higher. But currently, like, I just don't. This is like a hero that I'm struggling a little bit to place, but I think because she plays at instant speed and she's just a hero that has a fairly straightforward game plan, and she does have some ability to slow the game down if she wants. I think she's not too bad in terms of adaptability. As such, I give her a 10.5 out of 20, also in tier 2. Okay. Let's move on and talk about the tier 2.5s. Also known to me as the barely viable tier. So if you go to a skirmish and play one of these heroes, fine. I would not recommend taking any of these heroes to Worlds. There are some fundamental flaws to them. Let's talk about these 7 heroes here in the tier 2.5 category now. Starting up, we got KO. This is a hero that is very fun to play. Saying, all right, CNC for 12 is pretty fun. The issue is that KO is very inconsistent, and a lot of decks can fit in the Gambler's Gloves. And when your opponent has Gambler's Gloves, that's like having a Carrion Husk, effectively. KO is neither fast nor slow because some of his turns are going to be really explosive, and some of them, the CNC is going to come in for 3. So he's neither slow nor fast. In terms of power, he's neither weak nor strong because sometimes he's strong and sometimes he's weak. In terms of defense, he loses out a little bit on that, just because he's a deck that doesn't particularly want to block. That's kind of the issue. Like, if you could set up a very big turn as KO, you probably are just going to go for that. I've also seen KO builds where they're just blocking and throwing out a big attack, but I feel like that is probably not the correct way to build him. I don't know if anybody knows what the correct way to build him is yet. But anyways, in terms of adaptability, I don't think KO has a particularly adaptable deck. Kind of lives or dies by the dice. As such, he is a 10 out of 20, tier 2.5. All right, Dorinthia Quicksilver Prodigy. This is a hero that... this is a combination of Dorinthia and Kasai in not the greatest way. So she plays some attack reacts like Dory, and she plays some go-agains like Kasai. But the main issue is that Dawnblade Resplendent is not very threatening unless it has a counter on it, which means you have to draw Glistening Steelblade. So this deck is not particularly fast because even if you get 2 hits off on this hero, you don't get a Dawnblade counter for that. Dawnblade, this hero requires you to run Dawnblade Resplendent, which has a base power of 2. So you're not going to be killing anybody particularly quickly with Dorinthia. None of your cards are particularly powerful except for Glistening Steelblade, and as soon as they see that, they're probably going to dump their whole hand. So a lot of her power is dependent on getting the very first counter, which most decks can decently deny that. In terms of defense, Dorinthia, being a warrior and access to Valiant Dynamo, is actually pretty decent. Most of her cards do block for 3 as well, so she has decent defense. The problem is her game plan is too linear and too easy to... because she needs pumps and she needs go-agains, she can't really run the big pumps, which makes it a giant headache when you're trying to get Glistening Steelblade counters on Dawnblade Resplendent. As such, I gave her 1.5 in terms of adaptability, 10 out of 20, tier 2.5. Moving on, we have Levia. Levia has decent speed and decent power and decent defense because she can have Carrion Husk. The issue with Levia is that she basically has to play the same way every single game. She has to fill her graveyard up a bit, which is actually very difficult against the Wizards. And then once she hits the go button, she can't stop. And because if she stops, she'll kill herself. Of course, she does have access to things like Ebb and Fold, which is kind of a nice get out of jail free. And if you build your deck, you basically build your deck correctly, you probably are not going to whiff on 2 turns in a Blitz game. The issue is that if you ever get on the back foot as Levia, you're in a lot of trouble. As such, I don't really know that much about Levia, just being honest, but I've played against it 10 times or so in Blitz, and I've never really felt super threatened by anything that they were doing. And I could see what they were planning on doing, from turn 0. As such, I gave Levia a 10 out of 20, also tier 2.5. Lexi, this is a deck that on paper has pretty powerful cards and is pretty quick at, you know, chunking the opponent's life total. The issue with Lexi is that she has awful defense. If you're blocking, most of your cards block for 2 or 3, and the cards that block for 3 are your arrows, so you never really want to block with those. You have armor, but if you throw your New Horizons in front of something, you lose your arsenal and you're down to 1 arsenal slot. So Lexi just doesn't have a lot of block. She has no D-reacts in the traditional deck, and she has effectively no armor as well. So as such, she's as fragile as it gets, and as soon as you get the tempo on Lexi, she's in a lot of trouble. And the current Lexi builds in CC often have quite a bit of cards in the sideboard. And in Blitz, you kind of just have to build a deck that's good in general. So that feels like it's going to be an uphill battle for Lexi. As such, I give her a 9.5 out of 20 to 2.5. Valda Bright Axe. This is the only hero in the game with more than 20 life. Young hero with more than 20 life, other than Yoji, who has 22. But anyways, Valda is a guardian that has 21 life. And her first line of text is just not that relevant. Like, not a lot of heroes are drawing during the action phase, other than Plunder Run, Chain, Steelblade Supremacy, Dory, Tome of Fendel Dash, maybe. There's just not a Mask of Momentum, maybe, I guess. But like, her hero ability is just not very relevant. That's the first problem with her. And you have to build your deck in kind of a weird way to trigger the second part of her hero ability, which is if you control 3 Seismic Surges, cards with Crush Gain Dominate. Like, it's just kind of clunky. Anyways, as a guardian, not particularly fast. She also has to telegraph what she's doing 1 turn ahead, which is not good, which is why I put her power score fairly low. Because if they have any D-reacts in their deck, they're just going to, as soon as they see you going for the Seismic Surges, they're either going to push a lot of damage into you, get cards from your hand, if possible, to prevent you from playing Pummel or whatever, or they're just going to, sit on their D-react and, chip you down from there. Being a Guardian, she has decent defense, but she generally is going to run Earthwar Bounty. I think that's the name of the armor. So she's not running Tech Plating. She's actually losing out on some armor there. Valda, in terms of her adaptability, I don't see her being particularly high. She has to be built in a fairly linear manner. And she's just not getting much value out of her hero ability against most decks. As such, I give her a 9 out of 20 to 2.5. Ketsu. This is actually one of my favorite heroes to play. But it just is a bad version of Phi. Because if you look at the Ketsu specializations, those are Lord of Wind and Mugenshi Release. Those both rely on having multiple copies of those in the deck and having a stacked graveyard. And those are things that just don't happen in Blitz. And his hero ability, you'd rather just have more damage than just searching for combo pieces in general. Anyways, Ketsu is fairly quick. If you're not blocking him, he can kill you pretty quickly, especially if he gets a mass trigger. But pound for pound, his cards are just not as strong as Phi's, and MOM is really, Mass Momentum is really easy to deny for certain heroes can deny Ketsu MOM triggers the whole game. Ketsu's defense is also pretty poor. He has to run a lot of combo starters. Those all block for 2. And yeah, he's just not, he just doesn't have a lot of armor in general. His adaptability is also not particularly high. I think if you run into high armor decks, you're kind of in trouble there. As such, I give him a 9 out of 20 to 2.5. Next, we got our boy Bolton. The most fair deck in the game, I guess. And as such, he gets 2s in all of his scores. Bolton is not particularly quick. He has to find the right pieces to have a burst turn. I don't think you can play Sabers in Bolton Blitz. So you basically have to be playing Raiden, and Raiden relies on having big turns. And those take time to set up, so he's not particularly quick. None of Bolton's cards are particularly powerful. They're all fairly fair. And for a warrior, Bolton has very low armor. He's generally running Tunic, Snapdragons, and Helm of the Sharp Eye, so he's already missing a ton of block there. He might be running Brave Forge Bracers. He might be running Gallantry Gold. So there's a lot of defense he's just missing out on. Bolton also has some amount of 2 blocks in his deck. So the Courageous Steel Hands. So he doesn't have particularly high defense. Bolton also has pretty low adaptability. I don't really see how he's going to deal with some of these heroes. Like his deck is just too fair, unfortunately. And what he's trying to do is a little too slow and a little too, he's just average. Below average, I should say. As such, he gets an 8 out of 20, tier 2.5. All right, we have talked about 21 heroes at this time. Let's move on to tier 3, also known as the for fun decks. The very first hero here, it pains me to put Kano in tier 3. And when I started playing Flesh and Blood, I played against a lot of Kano. I played against, the Stormstrider Snapback Stir Forge combo. And Kano was a menace. Kano was just so strong. How the mighty have fallen. Kano is not particularly fast anymore. Without Stormstriders, you're at least 1 turn slower. Maybe several turns because you have to block. So there's that. A lot of the powerful cards in Kano got stripped from him. Snapback and Stir were both staples. Stormstriders. I just don't even know what to do anymore as Kano, losing all those cards. Kano's defense is absolute garbage. He has basically no armor, and some of his cards block for 2. He's also a deck that runs potions, so he has some no blocks in his deck. And in terms of adaptability, I don't see how you do anything other than set up a Blazing Aether combo on your own turn. Which doesn't even sound right on paper. So same with Icelander, this is a deck where I might be completely wrong in my positioning of this, but I just don't see how you could lose Stormstriders and still be a functional deck as Kano. As such, 7.5 out of 20, tier 3. Over to the right of Kano, we got Data Doll, MK2. The only hero in the game with 3 intellect. But she does have one of the most powerful hero effects in the game. And this deck is actually very capable of running you over if they go first and they hit their specialization on turn 0 and then boost into another item. The only issue is that you got all these items out, great, but you still have to kill your opponent, that takes time as Data Doll. So I would give her a 2 in terms of speed. Her hero ability is really powerful, so she gets a good score there. But just having 3 intellect is well, that definitely impacts your defense. Even though she has access to Teklo Heart, having 3 intellect and having a third of your deck not block means your defense is garbage. And you basically need 2 cards, preferably 3 cards as Data Doll to do anything. So I can't give her anything other than a 1 in terms of defense. And in terms of adaptability, you basically have to no block and pray that you hit enough items and can finish the game off from there. So there's no flexibility in your plan. So she gets a 1 there. Overall, 7 out of 20, tier 3. Azalea. Not particularly quick. Decent power. She does have some powerful cards like Red in the Ledger. But I don't see how... Ranger just suffers from having very bad defense and very clunky mechanics. And I don't see how Azalea just does anything when she's on the back foot. I can't give her more than a 7 out of 20, tier 3. Cav Dean, Trader of Skins. So now we're into the really for fun tier here. There was a deck that really slowed down the game and tried to finish with Slogism, Regurgitating Slog, plus 2 power potions and Glad Gauntlet. I just don't like being at there are no cards for the merchant class other than Silver Palms, which is a PvE UPF card. So you basically have to run all generics in your deck, which means the power of generics is just not high enough here. And a lot of generics don't block very well. And Kevdeen basically has one game plan. You go down, you step down together in terms of life, and then try to finish them off with a dominated attack. I don't see how you can play that hero in any other way. Very fun hero to play, though. Alongside Datadol, I built a Datadol deck, Azalea deck, and Kevdeen deck, but those were just for fun. This hero would be pretty fun in UPF, though. Anyways, tier 3, 6 out of 20. Shiana Diamond Gemini. This is a hero that I just don't know enough about it, and I've never seen it really perform very well. So I'm just going to give it a 5.5 out of 20. Finally, Janice, What You Need. Clearly this is a support class or support hero for PvE, and I don't see him in any 1v1 combat doing very well. 4 out of 20. All right, so let's summarize. So tier 1, we got Old Him and Chain. Tier 1.5, we got Dory, Reinhardt, Dash, Kasai, and Fi. Tier 2, this is kind of where tier 2 and up is what I would consider playable at Worlds. Ira, Bravo, Briar, Prism, Drillmai, Benji, and Icelander. Tier 2.5, so this is where I wouldn't take this to anything other than like a skirmish for fun or a local armory. You got KO, Dorinthia, Quicksilver Prodigy, Leviat, Lexi, Valda Bright Axe, Ketsu, and Bolton. And tier 3, we got Kano, Datadol, MK2, Azalea, Kevdeen, Trader of Skins, Shiana, Diamond Gemini, and Janice, What You Need. All right. So I hope that you guys have gotten something out of this, and you can kind of understand why I place these heroes where I place them. So let's move on to the summary or the key takeaways for this episode. So, like I said in the episode, metagame constraints in Blitz exist. Why do they exist? Because certain heroes are too quick, certain heroes are defensively too strong, and certain heroes are heroes that demand you to have a certain power level in your cards. In addition to those 3, adaptability is also very important because there's now 27 legal heroes. You never really know what you're going to be playing up against, and as such, you have to construct a deck that can handle a multitude of situations, and certain heroes are just better at doing that than others, frankly. So power, speed, defense, and adaptability are all necessary to succeed in the world's metagame. I think if you take a hero in tier 1 or 1.5, you'll feel much more comfortable than if you take a hero in tier 2. And in general, I would say just getting a couple reps against those heroes that you haven't played against in CC. So heroes like Kasai, you just need a couple reps against them. Anytime you play a hero against a hero for the first time, you actually can learn a lot. So even if you have a few reps against Kasai, make sure you have a few reps against Kasai with the deck you intend to take. It's very important. Another thing that I'd like to talk about is how the fundamentals and just your general skill gets tested much quicker in Blitz. Because having a lower life total means you get to decisions much quicker. You get to critical decisions much quicker. you get punished way quicker in Blitz, and oftentimes you need to think 2 or 3 turns ahead in terms of the life total cycles. And this is something that if you've played CC and you're playing a hero that kind of just high rolls a little bit, you don't actually have to think much about your end game. You don't have to think like, okay, if I take so much damage, I go to like 10, and then he'll go to like 2, and then, okay, can I kill him? Like, can I keep enough cards to, you know, threaten his life total? These are things that you don't have to think about in CC sometimes. But these are skills, these are things that you have to think about a lot in Blitz. As such, I think Blitz actually gets a pretty bad rap from people. And some of the formats for Blitz were pretty bad, admittedly. But I think they've taken a few steps towards slowing down the metagame and just, you know, banning cards and equipment that are just fundamentally unfair and a lower life total. Overall, I think the metagame right now should be in a pretty decent spot. As you can see, there were quite a few heroes that I considered to be viable. Anyways, this concludes episode 12 of Fab 201. This was part 1 of the fundamentals of Blitz. Next episode, episode 13, we're going to be going into part 2, where we're going to be talking about deck lists and general strategies and deck interactions for the top tier decks. And yeah, I hope that you guys will tune in for that. Yeah, so this has been a bit of a longer one. If you guys are still sticking around, I really appreciate it. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll answer them if I can. Anyways, this has been Josh. This has been Fab 201, episode number 12. I hope that you have a good day. All right, I'm out. See ya.